So, what seems to trip up most companies is they're caught flat footed when it comes to SOX.
Hello and welcome to another Topen Merrill Dimension Spotlight video conversation. My name is Scott Snyder. Today we're going to talk about the SOX compliance requirements, the complex SOX requirements, and the intersection of those requirements with the SEC overall financial reporting requirements for companies seeking to access the capital markets through an initial public offering. I'm really pleased to be joined today by Elizabeth Epler Jones, partner with Axia Partners out of Houston, Texas. Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks so much, Scott. It's great to be here.
Elizabeth, there's been a lot of activity in the capital markets in the last 12 to 24 months, specifically around initial public offerings. And as the slide on the screen demonstrates, that growth has really exploded from 2019 into 2020 with more than double the number of filings with the SEC. One of the most interesting results of this growth is the emergence of the SPAC IPO option. And as the slide also demonstrates, the number of SPACs, the percentage of SPACs filed in 2019 sat at just 28%. In 2020, that number rose to 62%, which is just an incredible rate of growth. I know our reporting right now, as of just last week, is showing nearly 225 SPAC filings already in 2021. So there doesn't seem to be any slowdown in that momentum as well. But no matter if a company decides to go the traditional route to reach the IPO or a SPAC route or even a direct listing, it's the intersection of those SEC reporting requirements with the SOX compliance requirements that really seems to be tripping folks up. You and I have talked about how we really encourage companies to begin acting like a public company long before they actually become a public company. But SOX and the readiness that companies need to go through to be prepared for SOX really is more complex than most people think.
So, as you mentioned, this robust IPO market we're seeing in front of us here has generated tons of questions, right? Phone conversations, Zoom meetings with leadership at these different companies. We find most often they generally have a broad understanding of SOX, but kind of struggle to answer these three questions. Number one, what will it take for our company to be SOX compliant? Number two, when do we need to comply with SOX? Number three, who in my organization needs to be involved? So first, let me take just a quick moment and go over the rules themselves. At its highest level, SOX compliance for newly public companies revolves around compliance with the 11 sections of the Sarbanes-Oxley Act of 2002, so basically SOX. For today's discussion, though, I want to focus on three sections: 302, 906, and 404A and B. The key to Section 302 are the personal statements that we show here from the CEO and the CFO. Here they have to actually sign off and say, financial statements have been reviewed and are materially correct. They are accepting personal responsibility for establishing and maintaining disclosure controls and procedures and internal controls over financial reporting. All significant deficiencies and material weaknesses have been properly disclosed, and they are not aware of any instances of fraud. With 906, the CEO and the CFO, while they do have to sign off that the financial report is materially correct, the real crux of 906 is around these application of criminal penalties. This is the first time that they can get penalized for certifying a misleading or fraudulent report. It can be up to $5 million or 20 years in prison. So it's a pretty big deal. Finally, under Section 404A, management must make an assertion around their internal controls over financial reporting. Are they designed and operating effectively? Under 404B, that's where the external auditors come into play, and they must attest or give an opinion on the company's internal controls over financial reporting.
So, Elizabeth, that framework around those basic tenets of SOX is really helpful. Thanks for sharing that. But what about that question that we get so often from new prospective IPO candidates, which is when do I actually need to be in compliance? When does SOX intersect with these SEC reporting requirements?
Absolutely. So, what seems to trip up most companies is they're caught flat footed when it comes to SOX. So, let me show you why. Let's start by saying, first of all, we recognize, obviously, that it takes an incredible amount of work for a company to go public, no matter which vehicle you choose to use. I want you to understand the SOX requirements and then be able to work backwards to give your company the most runway possible to get done what you need to get done. This slide is set up to illustrate the filing requirements along with the timing and the work needed to support those requirements under a traditional Jobs Act IPO, which means you coming through as an emerging growth company. So the first milestone that you're going to see here is the S1 filing itself. The requirement for this filing is disclosure of any known material weaknesses in the risk section of your document. So I'm sure you're asking yourself, Elizabeth, how do I get there? Ideally, you would start working through the documentation of your risk and controls about 12 to 18 months, or ideally at least 12 to 18 months in advance of your S1 filing. You'd want to perform a round of walkthroughs. You'd want to be able to catalog and manage your findings and make sure that everything has been appropriately communicated to the audit committee and ultimately in the S1 document itself. As you can see over here, we've assumed that you've gone effective right around the end of the year. In which case, now the clock has started on your first 10K. You're still required to disclose any known material weaknesses here, but what we've added is a new layer of complexity around the Management 302 and 906 certifications. We talked about that on the previous slide. What we're going to do to continue to support that is we're going to add a little bit more testing and obviously keep up with the reporting through the audit committee and ultimately into the document itself. So next up, we have our first set of quarterly filings and your second 10K. Keep in mind, as you can see, these 302 and 906 requirements, they don't go away. They just kind of keep adding. And now for the first time, we've added over here, management's assessment of internal controls over financial reporting. So to get there, we're going to have to do a little bit more testing and a little bit more reporting, but we're going to get there. It's going to be okay. So next up, we have our ongoing quarterly filings. This cycle will continue and to run until your company trips out of emerging growth company status. And in this scenario, we've assumed you trip out of the status at the end of the year. What happens now is your external auditors, in addition to the 404A requirements of management's assessment, your external auditors are actually now required to issue their opinion on your internal controls. This brings more work. This extra assessment does drive quite a bit greater effort for everybody involved. You have to have more precise documentation, you have to do more testing, and definitely you're going to have more reporting and communication all the way around.
Elizabeth, thanks for sharing that timeline. Those requirements actually feel quite daunting the way that you've laid them out. And of course, ultimately, you have to get to the point where the CEO and the CFO are comfortable because they'll actually need to sign those filings before they're submitted to the SEC. And certainly there's complexities behind the scenes for every organization actually getting to that point. SOX has tentacles all throughout an organization. Can you share with our audience sort of your perspective on the depth and the breadth of SOX inside of a company?
Generally speaking, when I'm talking to pre-IPO companies about the SOX impact inside of the company itself, I keep coming up with the image of a pyramid. So I'm going to explain this pyramid to you, this certification pyramid, and understand that the strength of the building comes from a strong foundation. Here we have a sample company with a certain number of key controls. We have a baseline of key control owners who are scattered throughout the organization. You can see here in our example, we've got accounting and finance, treasury, governance, information technology, and HR and payroll, depending on how the company is set up. These control owners are the folks who own the key controls, as I stated, and they ensure that their controls are in place and functioning throughout the year, and it's working the way that they're described, right? Under this approach, the control owners would then certify on a quarterly basis the same requirements that are required of the CEO and the CFO, meaning they'll go through and they'll say, I'm doing my work, there's no fraud, I've disclosed any kind of problems. From here, their department heads now have the opportunity to review these below certifications, make sure that there are no issue resolutions, and now they can summarize and bubble up that information to the next level to the CEO and the CFO, who are the ones, as you remember, the ones who are accepting personal responsibility. So they've got both the access to the detail and the summarized information, and they have a solid basis for making their own certifications. At this point, you can share this information with the audit committee members who, as well, have personal obligations around corporate governance and stewardship. You form a basis for your actual certifications that go into the document itself. Now, here's where this gets even more interesting is through the SOX automation process, through this technology, we can drive this entire pyramid with pre-configured workflows, issue and management resolution, as well as notifications within the app itself and through emails.
Just really feels like the key takeaway here is readiness. The fact that you really need to plan, and planning months in advance feels like the basic requirements here to be ready.
Absolutely, Scott. I take it up even farther than just months because, months you still think single digits. We really want you thinking about this as you plan your process for the IPO at the very, very beginning. Your internal controls really should be one of the very first things that you take into account because people don't consider is that a material weakness in your S1 filing, continual material weaknesses throughout the K process in the first couple of Ks and Qs, it really has an impact not just on your company, but how does this make your underwriters look? How does this make your external auditors look? How does this make your management team? What will the capital markets think about these continued errors? So the more that you can get buttoned up and locked down and really comfortable that everything is going to run the way that it should, the better off you're going to be in the long run. And the way you do that is you raise your hand and you ask for help early on, right? You say, hey, I'm good at all these things. This is maybe something I'm not so good at. How can this be easier? How can this go smoother? What information do I need to have at the tips of my fingers in order to make these decisions and make sure that I stay in compliance, but also that I am helping my entire organization be better, quicker, faster, stronger.
Elizabeth, it really feels like there's a reputation component to what you're saying. It's the reputation of your brand, and first and foremost, but of course the reputation that you give to your company through what you report in your financial statements.
Makes everybody look so much better. It's easy. It's easy if you do it on the front end. It's hard to play catch up. It's so hard to play catch up. We've seen it time and time again.
Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate bringing your valuable insight to the conversation. For anybody watching the video, if you want more information on SOX and SOX compliance technology solutions that we offer here at Toppan Merrill, jump on over to our website, toppanmerrill.com, where there's lots of information there on our solution. And of course, ways to get in touch with Elizabeth or any one of our other SOX compliance experts. Thanks again for joining us today.